Okay. I've got some informants at the front who are going to tell me, if they would concentrate, on whether I'm speaking too loudly, and I have informants at the back who are going to tell me if they can't hear, okay? So is it all right now, informants? Okay, good. Oh, sorry. I have to be introduced.
No, not
no,
really.
Oh, no. Okay, there's an announcement.
An announcement?
Yes.
All right. No, it's just a quick announcement. It's all right, thank you. Just to let you know that the winners of the raffles have been announced. You can see the list and see if you have been a lucky winner in the resource area. There's one here at the end of the hall and in the first floor on the other side, right? You're going to see posters with your names, hopefully, on them. And I think Claire doesn't need a presentation anymore. Thank you.
Infamy goes before you. Okay, good afternoon, almost good evening. This is two bits of bad news. First of all, it's 5 o'clock, and this is the graveyard shift. So congratulations for being here, and I hope by the end you won't wish you were in a grave. And the second piece of bad news is that I was told this was a workshop. Okay? But because it's the end of the day, I'm going to be nice to you, I think. Depends how you behave. So, let's make a start. First of all, though, I forgot to say this last time, and I'm being recorded. I'd like to say how grateful I am to FAAPI for inviting me to come and take part in this conference. Actually, I really would like to say how grateful I am. It's been wonderful and I'm really enjoying it. I'd also like to thank my university, the International Office, who paid for me to come, and my department, who are paying for me to sleep and eat. So I'd like to thank my university, but I would particularly like to thank FAAPI for inviting me, and for APIBA for making me so welcome. So I should have said that earlier, but as it's being recorded, now is the time. So thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you all for coming to the graveyard shift. So we're talking about writing, a subject very close to my heart. Can I just ask, was anybody at any of my pre-conference event talks in schools? Because there's a little bit of overlap. And who heard about my son's French postcard yesterday? Okay, so some of you know about it. I'll try. I have to be very careful with my anecdotes, because if you repeat them, people start to say, oh no, not again. Okay, so we're going to be talking about routes into developing writing. Yesterday, I was talking much more about technology and the role of technology and digital literacy and digital literacies. But today, really, I am focusing on writing. I don't care how you get it, but writing is what I want to focus on. So, we're going to be looking at what's involved in writing, a little bit on what is writing. We talked a bit about that yesterday, but now I want to go in more detail, and how we can teach it. And at that point, ladies and gentlemen, there's no such thing as a free lunch. At that point, there is the workshop task, and you've all got a piece of paper which will form the workshop task, so we'll be focusing on that. And then we'll finish off by talking about how the teacher can help. Okay. But just before we start, can I ask you, how many of you are teachers of writing, would you say? How many of you teach writing? Okay, so it's about half. How many of you would like to teach writing? How many of you like writing in Spanish? In English? Okay. Better than I thought. Okay, so the first question, and it's a workshop, remember, is what's involved in producing a piece of writing? And I'd like you just to note down what you think is involved. Now, I know pencil and paper or computer, but I'd like you just to spend about a minute writing down what else is involved in producing a piece of writing. I'm not going to gloss it any more than that. What's involved in producing a piece of writing? 1 moment, 1 minute. 1 moment, 1 minute. And if you can't be bothered, look at what the person next to you is doing and critique it. That'll make you popular. So 1 minute. What's involved in producing a piece of writing? Good, I like that, yes. Got brainstorming there. Got reader, that's nice. You written anything down yet? She's thinking. Creativity, yes, good. What have we got back here? Type of writing, yeah. What do you mean by that?
Different type of writing.
What do you mean by different type of writing?
Wow.
Do you mean genre?
Yes,
Text
genre.
type. Okay, yeah. Okay. You don't escape right at the back. Rubric, yes. Really important. Right at the back.
Yeah, haven't started yet.
Right. Get going.
All right.
Okay. Poor cameraman. It's hard work. Okay. Paper and pencil are absolutely essential for writing, I find. What have you got?
Ideas,
Connecting
organization.
ideas, yes. Great. What have you got? Blank page. That's all right. That's important for writing, a blank page. Okay, cohesion, coherence. Yep. What have we got here? Okay, yeah. Do feel free to plagiarize from your neighbor. Okay, I think that's about a minute. Okay, so tell me, what's involved in producing a piece of writing? Ideas, imagination, beliefs, background. Background to what? Knowledge. About? The world's a bit general, really. Genre, the text types, the gentleman at the back said. Yep, what else? Purpose, yes, purpose. I have a colleague who goes through life saying, because apparently an Egyptian student said this to her once, what is purpose? And it's a very good question, actually, what is purpose? And I think as teachers we should have that in our minds more often when we ask students to do things. What is purpose? That's not correct English, but it's memorable. Okay. Sorry? Yes, the target reader, the poor person that's going to have to read it, the teacher at midnight. Yes. Who else? Yes, emotional involvement. Yep. Not always. When I write a letter for the milkman, there's not a lot of emotional involvement, but, well, it matters to the milkman. It matters to the milkman. Do you know about milkmen in England? We have these milkmen who come and leave the milk at your door, and you say how many pints you want. Okay, contextualize Lexis. 1 pint, please. Yep, that kind of thing. Yep. What else? A plan. Organization. You're going to have to shout. The effect, the impact you want to have. Yeah, absolutely. Whoops. I don't need to continue. You've got all the ideas, but I'm going to continue because we're all in this room together doing this. So let's go on. Yeah. And if we're aiming for clear, fluent, and effective communication of ideas, and that's what writing is, whether it's a message to the milkman or whether it's a PhD thesis, clarity, effectiveness, and communication. So how do we get them? What are the things that are involved? I'm going to read out. You probably aren't going to be able to read all of this, particularly the naughty people at the back. But the first point is syntax, obviously. Sentence structure, sentence boundaries, stylistic choices, that sort of stuff. Secondly, grammar, and that's things like verb agreement, articles, pronouns, etc. Third one, mechanics, the nuts and bolts, handwriting, spelling, punctuation, that dying species that I talked about yesterday. In particular, which item of punctuation am I mourning the loss of? The semicolon, but it's not just the semicolon, ladies and gentlemen. I think the colon is not long for this world either. The inverted comma is seriously ill. Organisation, which you mentioned, things like paragraphs, topics, and support. It says cohesions, I don't mean cohesions. Cohesion, unity, that sort of stuff. Then you've got word choice, vocabulary, idiom, etc. What is purpose? You've got purpose. Audience, the reader. Is it my milkman or is it somebody else? What is my relationship with my milkman? Nobody mentioned this, but I know some of you know about it. The writer's process, okay? Generating ideas, getting started, that sort of stuff. The cognitive aspect of it. Genre, text types. Is it a message to the milkman? Is it a report? Is it a PhD thesis, etc.? And of course, our old friend content, ideas, the very first point that was raised here. I'm going to draw a line down the middle of this diagram, and I'm going to ask you to think why I might do that. I've split the diagram into two, and different things are going on in different halves of the diagram. If we focus on, the left side for you, over here, syntax, grammar, mechanics, organization, word choice, what are we focusing on? Language. If I teach these things, I'm a language teacher. And if I've only got 2 hours a week to teach English, and I've got to teach speaking and reading and listening, that's probably the best I can do. But I'm not teaching writing. I'm teaching language, and I'm using writing to teach language. So what's going on over here, on this side? If we focus on that side, content, genre, process, audience, purpose. What's the focus on there? Meaning. Well, meaning comes in here a bit. Message, yeah? Anyone else like to have a go? Meaning, message? Composing. Here, on this side of the diagram, the focus is on composing. Now, actually, which teachers should be teaching this? Which teachers, your English as a foreign language teachers, which teachers should be teaching students about this, starting in primary school? Not the language teachers, it could be, the language teachers often do it, but which language teachers? The Spanish language teachers should be doing this. The mother tongue teachers should be getting students to think about this. So that when the kids come to our classes, we can say, you know all that stuff you learned about writing in Spanish, well now you're going to transfer it into English. Now I don't know about Argentina, I've only been here 36 hours, but in my experience, and I work with students from all over the world who come to our university to study, and they have to write in English, for many of them, this has not been addressed. Writing is something that they have not talked about in Japanese or Arabic or German or French or Swahili or whatever their mother tongue is. The mother tongue teachers, ladies and gentlemen, are not doing their jobs. It's a major problem. And because they're not doing their jobs, we've got to do the job. Because writing is all of these things. Yes, language is involved, but composing involves more than language. And we know it involves more than language because, as I've said before, I think, I can't remember if it was here or somewhere else, if this was enough, if that were enough, I would not be standing here. Did I say this yesterday? Okay, you were here yesterday. I would not be standing here, ladies and gentlemen. I would be on my Caribbean island next to J.K. Rowling and Stephen King and Margaret Atwood. I would be a best-selling writer because if this was enough, every native speaker of a language would be a best-selling author. And I don't want to upset you, but it's not true. Now, J.K. Rowling did start life as a language teacher. Did you know that? She was an very poor English language teacher in Edinburgh. So she's one of us. But most of us don't go on to become J.K. Rowling. It's very unfair. So, this is a necessary but not sufficient condition. This stuff matters too. And actually, I don't care if some of this is wrong, if this is good. If the ideas are good, if the audience has been addressed, if the purpose has been addressed. Okay? So, for example, the question, the text that sometimes is given for some extraordinary reason, but write about London. I live in Reading, it's 20 miles from London, and our international students are given the essay title, London. How do you think they begin? I'll help you. London is the capital of England. Oh, yeah. That's really interesting. I live 20 miles from London. I know that. It is only worth beginning an essay about London with that sentence if you are in Ulaanbaatar, Outer Mongolia, writing for an Outer Mongolian audience. Or if you have a continuation of that sentence where you begin, London is the capital of England, but I think it should be Birmingham. Now it's interesting. Now you've got me. Then there was my student Mohammed, bless you, my student Mohammed, who for some reason was asked to write about his life in England, his experiences of England. I'll give you his opening sentence, ladies and gentlemen. I was his writing teacher. Opening sentence, all English people are unfriendly. Mohammed, could we have a word? Could you read your opening sentence to me, please? He got halfway through it, and he went, I don't mean you. I don't mean you. I said, but Mohammed, you've written all English people are unfriendly. I'm English. That means me, Mohammed. Mohammed, we need to do some work on hedging. You need to learn about hedging, and you need to learn about qualifying what you say. So thinking about audience, genre, thinking about content and purpose. As I said to Mohammed, do you want to offend me? Is this the reason for writing? Because Mohammed, you have offended me. And Mohammed was from Indonesia, and Indonesian people are very charming, and they certainly don't want to offend their English language teacher who is marking their work. So Mohammed had to do a lot of backpedaling very quickly. I didn't penalize him for his lack of tact, but I thought he needed to know that you've got to read what you say or what you've written through the eyes of a reader and of the target reader. So, what is writing? Writing is lots of things, but I'm going to go through the three that I think are most important. Firstly, it's a process. Here's a child writing, I think, a letter to Santa. Always a good person to write to, because he never replies, but you get what you want, hopefully. And this child thinks Santa would like a picture of a Christmas tree, so he's got some examples to copy. This boy has a good process. He's also got a glass of milk, which will help him to work. This is a great writer in the making. Writing is a process, as some of you know, I'm sure. And there are I'm going to give you a cyclical model of the writing process, which you may have seen before. It's very small, so I'll go through it. This has been around for 22 years now. The idea of generating ideas. It's based on cognitive psychology and what happens when you ask people to think aloud as they write, or at least when you ask Americans to think aloud as they write, and that's good enough for me. So, generating ideas is important. Mohammed, you're writing about London. Can't you think of something more interesting to say than it's the capital of England? And having got some ideas, you've got to structure them. You've got to decide how you're going to organize them. Do you really want to begin your text about English people with all English people are unfriendly? Is that a good way in for this audience? And having done that, you're drafting. And drafting means redrafting, okay? All writing, except maybe for my letter for the milkman. Even then, if I've got the number of pints wrong, I may have to cross it out and change it. But most writing means redrafting. And this is something our students don't realize. They see perfect products in newspapers and in textbooks. They don't realize how much blood, sweat, and tears went into the final product. So we have to make them draft and redraft. And if that means doing, instead of 10 pieces of writing in one term, only doing 5, but doing each of them twice, then that's the way to go. I would rather have 5 gems than 10 piles of, hang on, think of a good word, rubbish. Focusing. Okay, Mohammed, what do you want to say about Britain? You've obviously got a problem, let's get it out. Do you want to get it out in this area, or do you want to focus on something different? Shall we just talk about the climate, perhaps? That might be safer than discussing the people. What's your focus? What do you want to say? And all the time, you need to be evaluating what you've said. Is it relevant? Is it interesting for your audience? And there is your monitor, your internal voice saying, this is interesting, this is boring, she'll like this, she won't like this, or whatever. You need to be reviewing. So that's a cyclical model of the process of writing. Writing is a product. You have a product in front of you on the piece of paper that you have, okay? And I've got 3 paragraphs, or 3 bits of it here, okay? That's a product, a text that has been produced by a student, okay? The other thing that writing is, it's a social and a cultural activity. And that's why all English people are unfriendly is dangerous if you're writing for an English person. Students write together, potentially, or they're communicating with others online increasingly. But there's always, unless you are a great author, a poet perhaps, or you keep diaries, most people are expecting, and even especially great authors, most people are expecting their work to be read. You want a reader, and you want a reader who gets your message, and also is convinced by what you have to say. Or challenges it, but you want a reaction. You want the pints of milk to be delivered. You want your English teacher to love you and give you a high mark. And it's a social and it's a cultural activity. And one of the reasons I knew I could talk to Mohammed about that opening sentence, all English people are unfriendly, is because he was from Indonesia. I lived in Malaysia for 2 years. I know this is a polite culture. I know this is a culture where you would never, ever offend your teacher, and where you would never say something as rude as that about a visitor to your country. Now, he was in my country, but still, I knew this was against his culture as well as against mine, I have to say. Pretty international, actually. Don't offend your teacher. Not a good way to go. Okay. So, when we are thinking of writing as a social and a cultural activity, we're on the right-hand side of the diagram we were looking at before. You have to think of your audience. Who are they? What do they know about your topic? What do they not know about your topic? If Mohammed, as he was writing about London, I know London is the capital of England. I've been there. But what I don't know is what he thinks about it, where he's been, what it looks like through an Indonesian teenager's eyes. I don't know his experiences. That's what's interesting to me. What Mohammed thinks about London, not where it is and what the population is. Now, if he were writing for an Ulaanbaatar audience, or if he were writing for a geography textbook, it would be different. But in this context, where he was writing for me for a class activity, I needed to have his critique of the experience of being a Muslim male teenager in London and not speaking English as well as he would like. So purpose. Why are you writing? What's your message? What do you want to say? What do you want to get over? How do you want to leave your reader? Do you want to leave your reader happy? Do you want to leave your reader bored? Does anybody want to leave their reader bored? Right. But those teachers of writing here, do you ever feel bored at the end of marking the writing that your students give you? Yeah. Now, it's partly because there are so many and they're all on the same topic, but even so, genre, absolutely essential. Okay, and it's one of the things, if that's one of the only things you take away from today, I'd like you to think about genre. How does that relate to purpose? How does it relate to audience? And of course, underlying all of these is appropriacy. It was not appropriate for Muhammad to say all English people are unfriendly. It wasn't true, for one thing. But it wasn't appropriate to begin an assignment to me in that way. And it wasn't good academic writing either. He needed an introduction saying this essay will discuss the qualities of the British people, some of which are positive, some of which are negative. I shall begin with the negative ones. Something like that. But it's got to be appropriate in terms of all of those things. And that's difficult, particularly when you're writing in a foreign language. Because actually, when you're writing in a foreign language, sometimes it's enough just to get the language right. That's what people consider. They think, okay, it's enough to get the language right. But actually, it's not enough just to get the language right. So, those are the things that writing is. It's a process, it's a product, and it's a social cultural activity. And what I want to address now, and this is where you wish you hadn't come, is three questions. Well, these are the questions we're going to address together, but maybe after you've looked at the text in a bit more detail. So first of all, how can we help writers to appreciate and improve their process? How can we help them with that? How can we help them to improve the product? And how can we help them appreciate the social and cultural aspects of writing? And I actually think we can't talk about these things in isolation. I can't discuss this without talking about specific text. There you are. So this is where the piece of paper that you were given as you came in comes in. I'm going to need my very good friend Hubert to help me pronounce this name. Okay, you have the text in front of you. I have a language instructor here. He's been very patient. You have here the task. And the task was, think about a person you love or admire and write a profile of him or her in about 200 to 300 words. And the person that the student chose to write about was called, deep breath, don't, hang on, let me try, I'm trying. Renee Favaloro. Okay. I had a very good teacher. Okay, so you've got the text. This is the text as I received it, sent to me. It's a very interesting text for all sorts of reasons. And I'd like you to perhaps think about some of those reasons. I'd like you to look at it. We're going to be trying to answer these three questions, but I thought maybe just perhaps look at it in terms of thinking about what's good about the text and what are the problems with the text. Let's just do it that way. What's good about it and what's problematic about this text. So I'm going to give you, let's say, 5 minutes to read it through and talk to, in groups of 3, people around you, what's good about the text, what's problematic, and if you want to move on to the 3 workshop questions, that's fine. 5 minutes to begin with. What's good about it, what could be improved. Okay, so we've established that the writer is early 20s and lower intermediate. And you could think maybe this might be somebody who's got plans to do some academic writing at some point. So it could be the beginnings of an EAP course, possibly. What do you like about it? What's good about this text? There's a message. There's a real message. He's got his feelings in it. Is it convincing? Is this somebody to admire? Yeah, I had never heard of. He's not listening. I had never heard of him, but I read this text. I thought, I want to find out more. This sounds like my kind of man. Really interesting. Okay, so there's any other positives? Don't shriek at me. Yes. Yes, he draws on his personal experience. This is not what he's been told to say by history books or teaching at school. This is from the hearth. It's from the hearth. This is from the hearth. Okay. And it's convincing, and it's passionate, and it's important stuff. It's good. The content is great. Okay? And the content is half the battle. Actually, if you haven't got good content, it doesn't matter how good everything else is. The content is the most. So this person needs lots of praise for content. But there are one or two problems with this text. Okay, would you like to tell me what you think they might be? Organization, paragraphs, 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 so somebody said here. Yes, okay, so you have to, this person, I'm sure they know it from Spanish, you have to join ideas together into paragraphs, and you don't join them all with the word and. Okay, so a little bit of subordination wouldn't go amiss. Okay, what else is problematic? Yep. There's a bit of a problem with vocabulary, although I love it. I have to say, I thought hearthbreak was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. That's the kind of creativity I hate to crush. I also like the idea of him enjoying his father, but I thought perhaps we should leave that to his mother. But I'm afraid crush it we must. He doesn't want to be creative with vocabulary. He wants to be able to use vocabulary that people won't laugh at. So it's not a kindness to let him get away with that. Okay? So there's a few problems with vocabulary. However, could you understand it? Understandable. Yeah, I had a couple of comprehension problems because I don't have the background. So I got a bit worried about what a foundation was, and I don't know what a University of Medicine is. So I had a few problems there. That's not vocabulary per se, it's context, I suspect. Okay, so we've got some problems with vocabulary, we've got some problems with organization. He has given up on English paragraphs, quite clearly. Any other issues that you noticed, any other problems? Yes. Yes. Yeah, I got very worried about these points. I thought you had to pay points. It's hard to pay, and they ask student to approve with 9.5 up to 10 points. He lost me completely at that point. I thought you used pesos in Argentina. I didn't know you used points. Okay, so it only makes sense to an Argentinian audience, and of course you could raise the question, an Argentinian audience should be reading this in Spanish. So if he's going to write it in English, he needs to perhaps think about people who are not Argentinians. Okay, any other issues with it? We've touched so far on product, quite a lot on product, that's all, but also process, because he hasn't organized it very well. Okay, it's a little bit like a child writing in their mother tongue who will say things like, you know, we went to the beach and we had an ice cream and Daddy fell in the sea and the journey home was nice, and it's that just sort of stream of consciousness. And that's okay for James Joyce, but I'm afraid we're not at that stage yet. Okay, but also we're talking about English perhaps for academic purposes. This is a long way short of that. Okay, so this guy needs to learn about things like going from the general to the specific, or from the specific to the general. I don't mind which he does, but at the moment it's all very mixed up. We've got detail about him at the beginning and at the end, and then general stuff in the middle. Okay, so quite a lot wrong with the product. Process. What's wrong with his process? What has he not done? He hasn't revised it. He hasn't evaluated it. He hasn't edited it. Let's go back. Where are we? Let's go back to our process. There. There's quite a lot of things he hasn't done very well. Because I think partly because he's got so passionate about the topic. Okay? But he's generated ideas, lots of them. But he hasn't structured them very well. This may not be his first draft, but it's the first draft he's brought to class. It's the first draft he's shown us. But it's not a particularly strong first draft. He needs to understand that. If you're going to spend time as a teacher looking at this draft, it needs to be better. Okay? We've got a focus, which is that he likes the guy. So I think there is a focus there, but I think he needs to be better at evaluating his work. Perhaps he could be asked to translate this into Spanish, a bit like my son's French postcard. If he translated it into Spanish verbally, he might realize it reads as naive, it reads as badly organized, because I'm sure Spanish writers do not write like this. I'm sure this boy doesn't, this man or this person doesn't write like this. And all the time, he needs to be reviewing. Can I just ask you, heartbreak, is that a translation from Spanish? Where did he get that from? What did heartbreak? No? Okay. What about to be a doctor is a religion, not a work? Is that from Spanish? He doesn't know the word vocation, right? And he doesn't know job and work. He sees them as synonymous. Okay, so there are some influences there. Okay. But there's quite a lot to work on, and who is going to have to do the work to improve this text? He is. He's going to have to do the work to improve this text. So let's have a look at how we can help him. So process. Remember that. Those are some of the things that we can help him with there. Sorry, I'm going to have to go back through this to get to our questions. Okay. How can we help writers appreciate and improve their process? I don't think this writer has thought very much about their process of writing in English. They've not been guided to think about how to generate ideas. He's a natural. He's generated ideas himself. But he needs to think about how to organize them for a reader. And that's where, in a way, these things overlap. Of course they overlap. Process and this overlap. And the product, they all overlap. So the whole issue of generating ideas, one way into texts is through question words. Who, why, and what. Okay? And if he had just answered those questions, who is René Favaloro? Why do I want to write about him? And what did he achieve? That would have been 3 very good paragraphs. He could have had an introduction and a conclusion, and it would have been quite a good essay. Okay? If we think about his product, there are some spelling mistakes here, and there are some organization mistakes here. Which is more serious? Or not the spelling so much, rather, the language. Which is more serious, the language or the organization? The sort of the lack of paragraphing. I think the organization is more of a problem. It's the organization that makes this look like a child's writing. And this is a 20-year-old. He doesn't want to write like a child. This looks to me like a child writing in English. But he's not writing about childish things. He's writing about serious things. So the product needs a lot of work. And how could we help him improve his product? He brings this text to class. How can we help him improve it? Without looking at it. I don't want to see it. It's not good enough yet. How can I help him improve his product? What can I bring to class to show him? Other texts, written maybe by last year's students. So I'm not going to show him articles from the Times or the New York Times. I can show him texts written by other Argentinian students the same age, maybe the same level, but that are polished and have been produced as final drafts. And I'm going to let him look at those drafts and compare them with his. I'm going to let him look at that other text, a good text, produced by somebody at his level, so not Joseph Conrad or Shakespeare or something that he can achieve, and I'm going to ask him to tell me what's the difference between that text and his text. And if he doesn't notice that the other text has got paragraphs and it's got an introduction and a conclusion, then he shouldn't be in my class. Okay? The other thing I'm going to get him to do is I'm going to get him to work in groups with other students, and they're going to read each other's work. Now, pair work, exchange writing. I don't like pair work for feedback. Why not? What's the problem with working in pairs? I've never liked you. I've never liked you much, and also my English is better than yours. I have nothing to learn from you. I know that's how you feel, and I hate working with you. Okay, but she says we have to do it, let's do it. As quickly as possible, yes. Pair work is not a good idea, I don't think, because of those reasons. Also, if I work with you, and you tell me there's a problem with my text, it's your word against mine. I wrote it, I think it's okay, I'm not going to listen to you. So what's a good number of people to read a text and give feedback on it within a class? 3? 3 or maybe 4. I think 4 is probably enough. 5 is too many. It's going to take too long. So depending on how much time you have. But maybe 3 or 4, and you pass the text around, everybody reads each other's, answering questions that I've decided as the teacher, or maybe the students have nominated. So, is it an interesting text? Is it convincing? Does it give enough information? How could it be improved? Just those 4 questions on the board. Interesting, improved, I've forgotten the interesting, improved, convincing, any comments? Something like that. Do you know the English game Consequences? Have you ever played that with your student? Where it's a narrative on a, oh dear, that's another workshop. It's a narrative on a piece of paper, you write it down, you fold it over, and you pass it on to the next person. Well, I do this kind of feedback like that. Each person writes the feedback on the essay they've got, they fold the paper over, the feedback paper, and they pass it on to the next person, so the next person doesn't see the feedback from the first person. Okay? Keep it quick and dirty. So yes, no questions. Is it interesting? Yes, no. Is it convincing? Yes, no. Is there an introduction? Yes, no. Is there a conclusion? Yes, no. Whatever you want. You pass it on, and it gets back to the original writer, who then answers the question for their own text, having read 3 other people's. And then they open it up, and homework is rewrite your text in the light of the feedback from your readers. If 3 readers say it's not convincing, if 3 readers say it's not accurate, if 3 readers say it's badly organized, you have to listen. Even if 2 readers say that, you have to listen. Okay? And then you rewrite it for homework with that feedback. The teacher hasn't seen it yet. Teacher hasn't seen it yet. Are you waving your hands at me? I've got 10 minutes left. Okay. So that's one way of helping improve the product. Thank you. How can we help them appreciate the social, cultural aspects of writing? As I came round, somebody had written down on their piece of paper, when they were talking about the task, they'd written, what's involved in producing a piece of writing, they'd written down rubric, assignment rubric. This is a horrible rubric. Why? Why is this a horrible rubric? Do you get up in the morning and think, got a spare half hour before school? I'll just sit down and write about a person I admire. Do you do that? Ever? No. What's missing here? Audience, purpose, give me the G word, genre. What's the genre? Okay, when do we write descriptions of people? When do we write them? Think happy times, think miserable times. When do we write descriptions? Give me a genre where people are described. Obituaries. Okay, obituaries. We have a fabulous newspaper in England. This, if you know anything about England, this will tell you my politics, called The Guardian newspaper. And they have a section on obituaries. And it's the big names. But they also have a section called Other Lives. And they are ordinary people whose family or friends have written in to say why their grandmother is so special, or why their friend who's died is so special. Nice examples of obituaries. They all follow the same sort of format. They all begin by saying why their grandmother or friend or whatever was special, what they achieved in life. Then they go back to the beginning. They say where they were born, where they went to school, who they married, what their influences were in their lives. And then they finish off again by saying why they will be missed. That's one way of doing it, so obituaries. But also, this was clearly a very important man. You can have an obituary that would appear in a national or an international newspaper about him. Okay? When else do we write descriptions of people? Any of you school coordinators or bosses or university teachers? I have to do this all the time. References, when you have to write a reference for somebody. Okay, that's another scenario when we have to write about somebody. Okay, so you could make it imaginary. You could say, pick a person, alive or dead, and write a reference for them, for their dream job, saying why they should have it. Okay, and you could take examples of references in and show them. Any other situations in which people write descriptions of people, famous people? When people win awards, why should this man be given a Nobel Prize? Why should he be given an OBE, a British National Award or something like that? Yeah, when people get awards. Children's textbooks. Out on the publishing stands, there are examples of simplified readers. Write a description of this man's life for a primary school textbook in English, or a reader in textbook, and find some pictures. Do a poster about him to take into a primary school to share with children. And of course, Wikipedia. Wikipedia. In order to find out about this extraordinary man, that's where I went. Because from a socio-cultural point of view, there was a lot here I didn't understand. I didn't know why he killed himself. And actually, do you know the English expression, the elephant in the room? Do you know that expression? The elephant in the room? It means the enormous thing in the room that nobody is talking about. It seems to me the reason this man killed himself is one of the most important things about him, and the most, I don't know when it happened. I mean, that's the other thing. I'm thinking, oh my God, is Argentina like that today? I don't know. For a foreign audience, this was a very worrying text once you'd gone to Wikipedia to get some more information. So, and him being single, I didn't know what that meant. Does it matter in Argentina if you're not married? I don't know. And again, this bit about, so there was a lot here. So you could get students to read each other's texts and say, imagine you're reading the text as, I don't know, someone from Mars. Okay, a Martian has landed. Martians speak English very well. It's their language of choice. And this Martian has got this text. What do they not understand about it? Because they don't know about our Argentinian context. There was a lot that needed to be added in here for this to make sense. And also that whole point about points getting into university, what's going on there? Is that a different letter? Is that a different text? arguing for lowering standards for medical school. I don't know. And also that bit at the end. What does he mean by a novel doctor? And how relevant is that to all the rest of the text? So there's a lot from a sociocultural, a sociolinguistic point of view that we don't have. But he knows it. He knows the answers. And if he doesn't know the answers, like me, he could go to Wikipedia and have a look. It may not be right, of course, because he needs to know that Wikipedia sometimes lies. And if he finds a lie in Wikipedia, he can correct it. And he should correct it. So, there's the text. How can we help? We can help by bringing writing into the classroom, by getting students to read each other's work, by getting students to comment on each other's work, controlled by us, with questions, with checklists, perhaps, or some other way. Not leaving it as a homework activity. Because if you leave writing as a homework activity, you are not teaching it, you are, it's another T word, you are testing it. If writing is only done for homework, you are not teaching it. You are testing it again and again and again. I'm not saying all writing should go on in the classroom, but if none of it goes on in the classroom, if it's not discussed in the classroom, if it's not read and talked about in the classroom, then you're not teaching it, you're testing it. And I know you don't have much time, but it seems to me this topic could actually lead into a really interesting piece of work where there was reading and speaking and listening on famous people or people we admire, and the writing could be a beginning point, a jumping off point into that topic. It doesn't have to come at the end, the Cinderella skill. We can help them with this. This chap was able to generate ideas, a few too many ideas. I don't know we need all these ideas in here. Do we need the idea about points and university? I don't think that adds to our understanding of René, him, Favaloro, okay? The fact that this boy isn't happy with the points system is another topic. It needs to go, okay? So he's generated some ideas that he should evaluate and get rid of, but he's got some great ones. Okay, and if he's going to talk about him killing himself, I'm afraid he has to address the elephant in the room. He has to say why he killed himself. Okay, and that might be more difficult than everything else he's trying to write here. Okay? But you can't just drop that in and then leave it. I thought maybe he had mental health problems. You know, I was really quite worried about him at that point. I was trying to work out why would a successful man kill himself who's done all these wonderful things. He also didn't mention his achievements medically. He didn't talk about what a fantastic heart surgeon he was. That doesn't come through. I had to go to Wikipedia for that. So actually, he's got ideas, but they're incomplete. Another reader could tell him, you've missed out a lot. You've not given enough information. We can help with goal setting. What's the central theme? Is the central theme here, here's a great man I want to be like? Is that the theme? This is someone I admire so much, I want to follow in his footsteps. If that's the theme, then it's probably not an obituary. Maybe it's a character reference or something like that, okay? Or maybe it's a textbook for a reader, a simplified reader for primary school kids who should know about this great hero, if that's what he is. Providing help and support with drafting, that means peer review, getting students to give each other advice, and also looking at good texts from last year's students, final products, looking at those, comparing them. Peer support, okay? If your students are doing a piece of writing, I think before you see it, another student should read it and comment, outside class if you like, and they should put their name on it too. Peer reviewed by. Because then, if it's rubbish, there are two people you are annoyed with. Is it time to stop? Is that subtle? Subtle? You must meet my husband, he'd like that. It would, yes. Encouraging peer support, making it, forcing it. I find students are less embarrassed by me seeing rubbish than by their classmates seeing rubbish. You know the idea with the piece of paper you pass around where they give feedback? Teachers sometimes say to me, what do you do with a student who doesn't bring their homework, who doesn't bring their first draft? Very easy. What do you do with them? There's always one bugger, or more than one bugger. It's a technical term, bugger. These are people who do not do their homework. What do you do with the student who comes to class and you've got an activity based upon reading each other's texts, passing them around? What do you do with a student who hasn't done it? Yes, you do. They write it in the class while the other people are reading and commenting. They sit on what I call the naughty table. They sit on the naughty table, they write it, and their homework is the same as everybody else's. They have to rewrite it, but they've had no feedback. They haven't read any other texts. Pity. Tough. I'm not going to allow my class to be dominated by the buggers who don't do the work. I'm also not going to allow my class to be dominated by rubbish. I don't want to read rubbish. It's got to be good. It's got to be the best they can do, and then I want to read it. Okay, reviewing, yes. Self-evaluation, yes. Oh, gosh, time to stop. Yes, yes, and yes. Sounds like something out of When Harry Met Sally. Redrafting in the light of the review. Knowledge of text features, reading obituaries, reading references, reading children's simplified readers. What should it look like? Okay. Whole text writing tasks, but with a purpose, with an audience, with a genre in mind. And, I'm sorry, but I think we need to also do the writing tasks with our students. So they see us. Ours is one of the texts that gets fed in to this peer feedback thing, with mistakes, with problems. Students love seeing mistakes that teachers have made. Teacher, you spelled it wrong. It's not, you've missed something out, okay? They need to see us doing it, one skilled process, and understanding that we also have to work at writing, and we revise it. Don't make it a secret. Writing is bloody hard work. I hate it. But sometimes in life you have to do it. Okay, I shall stop there. Thank you very much.